Hey, you are listening to Biscasing, where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your co-host, Mark.
I'm your co-host, Pee-wee-herman.
Yeah, okay. And
No, I somehow my Pee-wee sounds a little bit more like Kermit the Frog here than actual Pee-wee. So
yeah, Kermit the Frog or hacking up a hairball, one or the other.
yeah, and well, we are here today talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer to remember the great Paul Reubens. Let me just say, this celebrity death broke my heart.
Yeah, he was Pee-wee. Everybody from the late 80s, early 90s knew who Pee-wee was. We all watched that show. And even some of the Rob Zombie was even involved with that show originally. It was so weird who all was involved with that show at some point or another. But yeah, Pee-wee he was for a long time through that time period a almost like a cultural icon.
But I mean, yeah, even like we've established on this show that like there's a discernible age gap between myself and you. And I grew up on Pee Wee, man. I would come home every day after school and watch Pee Wee from like eh, you know, as as long as like I was like as like young as like 3 to like almost like upwards of like 10 or 11. And then getting into adulthood and like I saw like some of his like other movies like Below, which he was fantastic in. Um the Pee-wee movie that him and Joe Manganiello did a couple years ago, which was great. And then just kind of like discovering some of his like other roles, including Buffy. Um so yeah, I this man was like a huge part of my childhood and like legitimately broke my heart to see this. Also, Mystery Men, he was the spleen. Let us not forget that.
Well, the thing with Buffy, I think it was the first movie he did, the first role he had, right after getting busted in the porn theater. So, did you
When
not
in
know about
Rome.
that?
I did. Oh, of course I
Okay,
knew about that. I'm
it's
curious to I'm curious as to what came first because these were both 92. So it was either this movie or Batman Returns because he was also Penguin's father in that movie.
but yeah, that was also just like a little bitty little cameo.
It is.
It was
But he
just like what,
reprised the
2 minutes?
role in Gotham. Yes.
Yeah. So what did he do? Take over for the guy that was playing Penguin or something?
No, he was, I think it's introduced in like season 3 or maybe even 4, but he's introduced as the Penguin's father for that version of Oswald Cobblepot as
Cobblepot.
well. Cobblepot, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure which came first, but that was more of just like a little 5 minute role where he was one of the main villains in Buffy.
Which, all right, so I'll get into this, but this was such a vastly different role for me to like see him in because even when he's the bad guy, he's always got a little bit of like charisma to him. He doesn't have that here. Like they like straight up like went sinister. And then for like the last shot, they were like, we need to lean into his comedy. So like they like his death. Like there's a post-credit scene to this movie where it's like it's his death, and he's just like, and I was like, I was here for it,
it's
man. Every
it,
second of it.
that's one reason. It's kind of messed up. That's one reason I was like, we should do Buffy for this episode, is because it really is one of my all-time favorite death scenes in a movie is him dying in that movie because it's just so over the top and exaggerated and goofy and awesome all at the same time.
What gets me about his death in this movie is the fact that like it's at this like the climax of the movie where Buffy has just faced all of these vampires. She's dove into her destiny, and then like she's getting ready to kill like the head vampire of what's his name? Like
Rutger Howard.
Rucker. Yeah, well, I know that, but like what's his name? It's like Latosis or
Uh,
something.
Lothor. I think
Lothor.
it's
Okay, so
Lothor.
she's getting ready to kill Lothor, and then he just has this like big over the top death that I just like absolutely loved. It's so good.
Yeah, it's there's actually a handful of actors in this movie that have died. He was one, Luke Perry's one,
Hmm.
Rutger Hauer's a third. And then you got Christy Swanson. She was big during that was like her heyday was at early to late 90s. And then she kind of started slowly fading out. But that was one of her big roles, was this. And then you had Ben
David
Affleck.
R. Ben
Ben
Affleck,
Affleck.
David Arquette.
Yeah.
Um,
It had so many like actual names in it. Hilary Swank.
yep.
Uh,
Donald Sutherland,
the principal was and been in a
S-
bunch of little comedy roles.
Stephen Root. He is the
Yeah.
guy from Office Space. He's the voice of Bill Dauterive on King of the Hill. Ricky Lake makes an appearance in this movie at one point.
Yep. She is a waitress in the bar in the restaurant.
Yes, and I don't know if you caught this, but Sasha Jensen is in this movie,
Sasha
and
Jensen.
he might be a no-named actor to a lot of people. However, he was the final girl's boyfriend from Halloween. So
It's
Halloween
been a long
fans,
time. It's been a long time since I've seen that
yeah,
one.
it's a great one. I love that. That's
Was
probably
he
one
the
of my favorite ones.
basketball player that gets turned?
He is. He's the basketball
Okay.
player from the beginning, but then like comes back and kind
Gets
of is
turned
the
into a
yeah, he's like
okay.
the linchpin to like the entire climax.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot in it. And like Ben Affleck is just like in there for 10 seconds, long enough to be like a little peon going, God, take the ball. And then that's it. It's funny to see who else in the movie compared to who some of them are now.
Yeah, and I don't think we brought this up, but David Arquette's in this movie as well, like
Yeah.
pre-Scream.
He's
He
he's
is
Luke Perry's
Benji.
best friend.
Benji, yeah.
Yeah. Pike and
The
Benji.
Ike and Benji, dude, like this cast is was like honestly just absolutely incredible. Like I said, this is my first time watching this, and I like this was like a who's who of like 90s
Oh, you had
people.
never seen this?
I'd never seen this before. It has been in my queue to watch for like 2 years.
So you got
Uh,
to experience the Pee-wee death for the first time in all of its glory.
I did, and I like,
It's probably the best part of
yeah,
the movie.
it.
It's
So, all right.
it's one of my favorite parts of the movie.
So,
As, as messed up as that sounds.
all right. So, I'm starting to give myself a headache. So I'm gonna say this real quick so I can take these glasses off. So, if you guys are watching us on Patreon, and if you guys don't support us on Patreon, it's patreon.com/victims and villains. For as little as $2 a month, you guys can help us get mental health resources in community centers, local libraries, conventions, film festivals, and you get early access to episodes before they drop, as well as video formats of them. And I am wearing my Terrifier 2 sunflower sunglasses for a very distinct reason. So you haven't seen Terrifier 2 yet. So
I
we'll
have
reverse
not.
the rules. So there is a scene where Art the Clown wears the glasses that I'm currently wearing. And when the news broke of Paul-Reubens' death, the writer-director Damien Leone actually had a picture shared with that picture of Art the Clown and the picture of Pee-wee with the X-ray specs on from Pee-wee's Big Adventure in the magic shop, and actually said that the scene where Art the Clown is wearing these glasses was a nod to Pee-wee. He said that that was like one of his like all-time favorite films of all time, and I I just wanted to throw that. I thought that was an awesome fun fact. So if you did not know that about Terrifier 2, if you're not seen Terrifier 2, please change that. But that's a little fun fact. But yes, this was my first time watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, that's a shame. It's a fun movie. It's not a great movie. It's just a fun movie. And that's like a
No,
lot of things that come from the
no,
90s.
no.
It's fun.
This was a great movie. I will say that this was a great movie. This is up there with like in terms of like movies that we've recently covered. This is up there with Frankenhooker. I think this movie is like it's so dumb in logic, but it's so much fun and it knows and it understands what it wants to be with its camp. And I think part of the reason that I like it so much is one, the language, what's the sitch, like as
Valley
if like
Girls.
Valley Girl, like the way that embraced it for my generation, that was all Kim Possible lingo.
Well,
So
for us, that was Clueless and Buffy.
yes, but a lot of the language and like catchphrases that Buffy and her friends use went on to go inspire Kim Possible, which is an entirely different generation, my generation. And I was like, man, I was like that's it's really cool to kind of see where that comes from. Uh, but I I love movies like Clueless and like Drop Dead Gorgeous and just dumb comedies. And I think that this one just it knew what it wanted to be and it just took the audience on an absolute joyride. And like I watched this movie with a legitimate huge smile on my face the entire time.
Yeah, and I don't mean it's not like a great movie, like it sucked. I just mean it's not like something that's going to go down as legendary. It's just a super fun and awesome movie. It's just
I
not. It's not going to fall in the category of like Interview with the Vampire, or The Thing, or Halloween as like legendary like that.
no. So like when it comes to like horror, there are the master classes like you said, like The Thing, Halloween, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like the classics. And then you have these like subsidiary groups of like cult classics.
This could fall into that, and that comes from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer show through the 90s and early 2000, which supposedly, I don't know, uh, I knew somebody that used to watch it religiously that claimed it's supposed to be a sequel where they went to another town to get away from everything that had happened, which really didn't make sense because she was a senior in that one. So how did she go back to being a freshman?
So here's the console. I only have watched a very, very small fact of a fraction of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV series.
I didn't
And
really watch much of it at all.
if I remember correctly, and listeners correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure there is a character that's actually a villain that is actually named Pike in the series, and he's a vampire.
I don't know.
Um,
I didn't watch it enough to know.
but it's the same. See, this is the thing that I like about this though is that it's so self-contained. Like you don't need to like watch it. Should the series be the like legitimate sequel? I don't feel like I need to jump into the series like this. Watching this movie, like I liked this version of that character. I liked the way that Christy Swanson played Buffy. I liked how her character grew throughout the, under 90-minute runtime this film has. And I just, this film was such a perfectly contained story that it's the rare thing that, like, for me to say, like, I don't want to see this character continue on.
Yeah, it's not like Ash versus the Evil Dead, where it's a continuation of the same character and very clear that that's what it is supposed to be, a continuation of the story. But whether it is or not is almost irrelevant. You don't have to even know about the show to enjoy the movie. And you don't really have to know about the movie to have, for some strange reason, like the show. But it is what it is.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm,
or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Yeah, like that's just the thing that I have this like really weird pet peeve when it comes to like the like if a movie inspires a show, like or a show becomes so popular that it inspires the movie. If the movie does not affect the series or the franchise as a whole, then to me it just feels like, a separate adventure, throwaway thing. Whereas this I feel like is the complete opposite. I love and care about these characters so much that I don't want them to want to jump into more. Like I feel like this was the perfect blend of what I needed.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't require anything outside of what it is. It is what it is for a reason, and people still watch it because it's fun and because you don't need anything else to go with it. They didn't make any sequels. Well, they made comic books and the TV series, but I mean, actual
Yeah.
like movie sequels. But yeah, you get
See,
what I'm saying, though.
and I think
They didn't have to continue it.
no. I
It's
think
good on its own.
I think
I'll
for
shut up.
myself, like I've established this now with Interview with the Vampire, Bram Stoker's Dracula. Like I've interjected my narrative and my personal feelings when it comes to vampire stories. I'm not a vampire guy. So
Yeah,
like 7 series of a vampire show does not seem very appealing to me. And I was I was curious about this film. I had no expectations coming into it. And within the first 10 minutes, just spending time watching this and being introduced to the characters of Buffy, Pike, Benji, like I think is the movie scene, like the scene where they're in the theater where I was like, I don't care what this might be, like top 5 best vampire movies I end up watching. And it's I'll do you one better. It's top 3 vampire movies for me.
and it's not a bad vampire movie. It's just the level of camp in it might be what you need to enjoy a vampire movie, where Interview with the Vampire was more of a drama than a horror, and seeing vampires as beings as opposed to creatures. In this, they're just kind of goofy teenagers led by Rutger Hauer and Pee-wee-Herman. So
I I love like I think some of my favorite scenes are the scenes between uh Buffy and Merkin where he's like they're like training her, they have that montage and it's the first scene post montage where she goes out and she kills the vampire and then they go back and they're starting to have this conversation. He's like, did you feel it? And he's like describing this these cramps that you would feel in your stomach. And he's like,
She's
yeah,
like,
I
my
did, but I'm a little bit
superpower is
early.
PMS.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's part of what just makes it so fun. It's just that even like when he's trying to explain things, it's all like goofy. It's all just like dumb dialogue that's like, wow, that's absolutely the most ridiculous thing I've heard of. But it works. It fits. It's like the early days with um Michael J. Fox and Teen Wolf. It's a
Hmm.
goofy, supposed to be like a werewolf movie, but it's a comedy and goofy and this same exact style that this is. It makes no sense, but it's great.
I I think I think that what makes Buffy unique is just its
It,
quirkiness and how it embraces that camp, but it feels like a movie of that era. And
it's also a movie from a time period when strong female leads were few and far between.
this is
So,
true. And I think at that point, like this was released in 1992. So at that point, I think Ripley was really the only one that we had to look for in terms of, and Sarah Connor,
yeah,
in terms of like strong female characters that were leading films released by major studios. And this movie is released by Fox, who at the time was considered a major studio. A lot of the other quote unquote strong female characters really came from independent studios. Like when you think of like Nancy Thompson from The Nightmare on Elm Street, or we're still a couple years before Sidney Prescott. But a lot of the strong female characters of this era were either released via independent studios, or as you said, were just very far and few between.
yeah, and that's another reason this I think this kind of stands out from the time period as to what it is because it was led by Christy Swanson. I think it was one of her first lead roles too. I believe it was one of the first movies she did as the lead, or very early in her career as being a main character.
I mean, that to me makes me love this movie even more. I think, the fact that it kind of almost has like this like Halloween quality to it, right? Where here you have a lead actress that's virtually unknown at the time of its release that is being essentially shadow or mentored by a established actor, who in this case would be Donald Sutherland. Um,
Or
it,
Hilary Swank, who went on to win
she
awards for
did, but
movies later.
this is still really early in her career, even.
Yeah,
Um, you know,
but
so
it's just kind of the fact that she was the lead, and you've got some of these other actors in there who went on to win all kinds of awards, and she was the lead in it.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I 100% am okay
It
with that.
it doesn't take away from the movie. It's just kind of interesting to see.
What I think is really funny about this movie is that when this movie opens up, it's talking about like what they label like the Dark Ages, right? When you have
Something
that
like that, yeah.
monologue, and then it fast forwards to the present day, which is supposed to be 1992, and it's called the Light Ages. I like lost it watching that. I was like, I've never seen a movie that takes like liberty to call a time period something that it wasn't. But when you think about the 90s, like watching it for the first time in 2023, it was like that was the decade of raves, cocaine, glow sticks, neon. Like I mean, that was
And the
like
world
the
didn't
yeah.
seem to be as serious of a place either growing up in that time.
No, and I think like you look at like other movies that come out from around this time where like Blank Check is a great example of one that I'm thinking about. Clueless, Drop Dead Gorgeous, Casper, like all of these like other films that came out, like even like other horror movies that were intended to hit for this age group with Goosebumps, Are You Afraid of the Dark? All of them were like they were never like heavily serious. Like they might address like serious thematics. Like I think this film does have a couple of like serious like thematic moments, but uh for the most part, this is just a really light watch, and I was really appreciative of that.
I mean, it's also the same time period we got the Addams Family,
True.
and
I,
those two movies are still excellent, and it's part of that time period that I've talked about before, where I think they were able to experiment with movies, and we were seeing things we hadn't seen because everything was just kind of like it is now, where we're just getting rehashes of the same thing over and over again with different names attached to it. And it was kind of like that. You had a large time period through like the 50s with all the musicals and singing and dancing, and each time period had their own style. But then we started getting into like the mid 70s through the 80s, where they started experimenting and really branching out with what they could do. And this is during the middle of that time period where we got so many fun movies and memorable movies.
yeah. And I think that's like really what makes this time period in film so fascinating is that we it's like you said, like right now, like we're seeing that with Barbie and Oppenheimer, where like these are the
God,
first like original movies that you're getting, so they're juggernauts. And
Oppenheimer was so freaking good.
yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. Like that's the thing, is that they're not just like movies that are just kind of throwaway. Like both of them are like freaking good in their own right. And they really embrace that idea and that concept of being blockbusters. And I think when you look at, you know, especially in this landscape like of horror, like this is the time period where uh the slasher genre is mostly dead. Like at this point they're all trying to kind of like rehash, and so again this spots out. But I have a trivia for you. I have two trivia facts for you real quick. Did you know that Seth Green makes a cameo in this movie?
I think he's in the background, either in the movie theater or the restaurant, one or the other.
So, uh, he apparently thinks that he is believed that he uh gets kicked out and got cut from the movie. However, he is the red-haired vampire that gets kicked by Buffy outside the gym when a group of vampires, including him, are taunting her. You can recognize him by his haircut alone. Not to mention that this film originally also was supposed to feature cameos from David Bowie, Mick Jagger, and Carrie Elways as vampires, but they were cut for budgetary constraints.
I can see that. I can
I would
totally
have
see that.
loved to see a David Bowie vampire.
I mean, there's little things here and there that when you hear about them for this movie, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. I could have seen them doing that. And that's just another one of those things. So it's a fun movie. Pee-wee was a great vampire.
Which, yeah, coming back to Paul Rubens, like Paul, I really would have wanted more of his character in this movie. Like, not to say that the other vampires won't, but there's just something about an actor who has like a specific type, and anytime that they get to play against that archetype that they're famous for, that's why when you watch him in a movie like Below is another great example. He plays a very hardened, very sexually promiscuous drug dealer, and it's so against his type. But then you watch him in a movie like this, and you're just like, he he has like so much aggression to him, and he has like a lot of the charisma in this one is played by Rucker. What's his last name?
Rutger
Rucker
Howard.
Howard. Rucker Howard definitely has like the charisma in this one. Whereas like Paul Rubens is definitely like kind of like the angsty archetype of a vampire.
But Paul Rubens still kind of stole the show. His
That's what I'm
scenes
saying.
are just some of the best scenes in the movie.
He's
As
also
a
got some of the best quips in the movie too.
Oh yeah, yeah, he's great. It's one of my favorite roles he played outside of Pee Wee.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
can
I
definitely see
think
that.
I think part of it is because of how different it was that we all knew him at that point. It was just so much different and so far off the wall from what everybody had seen him as. So
Well, I mean, like at that point in his life, like you really had to like do something kind of drastic to kind of reinvent yourself because if I like remember correctly, like Pee-wee essentially was like uh, he was trying to kind of I think like get away from the Pee-wee archetype of that show because like that Pee-wee had 1990 was the um 1990 was kind of the was when they produced and it stopped producing Pee-wee's Playhouse. But he was again, when you have a specific role and you are tied to that role or um I'm trying to think of the word. There's like a specific word when you are like
typecast.
thank you, typecast as Pee-wee-Herman, you have to do something as drastic as Amlin. Like I think that's the only way that like you kind of like break that and you show people that like I'm not a character, I'm an actor.
Yeah, and I think some of that came also not just from Pee Wee ending, but from getting busted and how public they made it. I think some of that also came from, hey, I'm not a kid star. I'm a person and an actor, and I can do more than a kid show. Lawrence Fishburne, that's who I was thinking. He was also one of the main
Cowboy
cast members.
Curtis.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really a shame like when that kind of like those two go hand in hand, unfortunately.
It
Uh
was just it was so weird when the because they were so public about the arrest because he was a celebrity.
yeah.
But I think it was because he was more towards the kids crowd is why they made such a big deal of it. But it
Yeah.
was just kind of so weird, and it hurt it. I think it hurt his career so badly at the time that he came back and did this role that was something so different from what he was known for, almost like it was an attempt to kind of, hey, I'm a human being and I'm more than just Pee Wee.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, and I mean he went on like after this, like I mean, his roles are pretty sporadic throughout this. So like after this, he did like Nightmare Before Christmas, another iconic movie. He did
Who
Dunstan
is he?
Checks In. He
Who is he
was
in Nightmare Before Christmas?
the voice of Locke.
Oh, one of the
Um,
kids.
yeah, he was Matilda. He starred in Matilda. He was in Murphy Brown. Went off and did a movie called Buddy. Uh, he did like odds and ends like here and there, like he was in Mystery Men, as I mentioned, but then he has like then he does something, turns around and does something like Blow 2 years later, and he stuck to doing a lot of voiceover work, but like anytime that like he would make a dramatic role, it seemed like he always went for going against type. Like it was always these really hard, dramatic right turns into a brand new, uh, just brand new, like
Well,
field that you've never seen before.
I mean, Bob Saget did something similar. He was so known for being family friendly and everything he did on TV. Um, his stand up
It's
was
terrible.
hilarious.
It's
Was
so funny.
hilarious, but it was horrible at the same time. I mean, he did a song called "My Dog Licked My Balls,"
Yeah,
and
I know.
that's just a taste of how bad Bob Saget got. So I guess he could have gone further with how he went with his career when you look at something like Bob Saget, but I don't know that he necessarily had to. I think he worked roles that he just felt like working. I don't think he was just like some of these other actors that take whatever they can get a hold of or try to get in everything they know. But I also know about the last, was it 6 or 8 years, he was fighting cancer, and
Yeah,
that's what finally got him.
yeah. And
So,
I think for me, like one of the things that like as someone that grew up on Pee Wee and is like really shocked like seeing him in stuff like Blow and like even here like these roles that are so against him, like for as a cinephile, like I love to see his range and like what he's capable of. And I think that like those are roles that he really shines in. And looking through his like filmography, like a lot of his stuff, at least in the very last like few years, are like the majority of them are like you know guest spots on TV shows or like
I think he
voiceover
did.
work.
I think he did a lot of production too, didn't he?
Let me pull that up. Not really.
Oh, okay. I thought I read somewhere he did a bunch of producing.
No. But
Hmm.
I mean, like I think that like if it seems like he was really kind of comfortable in like the projects that he picked.
Yeah.
Um, I think that like, in an alternative reality, like I would have loved to see him kind of explore more roles like Hamlin. Because I think he knocks it out of the park here. And it seems like this is like such a taste of like what he could do. Like I would love to see him on in like a full on horror comedy. Like the fact that the post credit scene of this is like a continuation of his death scene, like speaks volumes to like his character and his value to this movie.
It is one of the best post-credit scenes ever. Ah, eh, ah. Yeah. Well, he also had a problem that some actors get that gets typecast, like the guy Jason Parsons that played Sheldon. Anything he's
Oh,
in,
Jim Parsons.
Jim Parsons. He just looks like Sheldon playing another character. Um uh Daniel Radcliffe, just for the most part, in most roles, not all, but most,
Yeah,
looks like Harry Potter playing somebody else. But then he does have some roles like in Guns Akimbo, which is friggin' fantastic, and I gotta get
Swiss
you to
Army
watch.
Man. Yeah, like
Swiss
he's
Army
one of those
Man.
actors that
He's
like
got
really went against like what he was famous for.
Yeah, he had a big problem with alcohol during the couple of the Harry Potter movies. He
Yeah.
got himself together, cleaned up, and he just started taking roles that he liked after that, that he thought were interesting, like horns.
Yep.
Horns, we could probably do an episode on sometime because I think
Yeah.
it falls in that category. But
Uh,
it's a good movie
I
that
mean,
he did.
Elijah Wood also is another example to like add that. I mean, yeah, like he had like pre Frodo days, but then like Frodo was kind of really what made him this like household name, and
He
like
can't.
now
I think
most
they
people know
were.
him as Frodo.
I think they were roles that made him enough money that allowed him the freedom to do what they wanted. And Elijah Wood went on to start like a horror studio.
Yes, he did, which is responsible for Mandy and Color Out of Space, the most recent
Yeah,
That's High Praise episode. Mark guest starred on. Go check it
yeah.
out. Um,
So I think that's the case with people like them. I don't know if that was the case with Paul Rubens though. I don't know if he made enough from Pee Wee to be able to just pick and choose,
but I
or
mean,
if he was.
he played that character off and on for
Yeah, I think
years.
there were what, two or three different Pee Wee movies
So there are
after.
th so there are so there's the four seasons of Pee-wee's Playhouse. There is Pee-wee's Big Adventure, um, Pee-wee's Big Top Pee-wee, and then there is Pee-wee's Big Holiday, which was the 2016 Joe
Yeah.
Manganiello buddy picture that they did. But I mean, he also like you go through his like filmography, it's just like random appearances. Like he did WrestleMania 27. He did Pee-wee. He did Pee-wee on Broadway. He was did Pee-wee on Raw. Like he did Pee-wee short films. I mean, he really embraced this legacy of Pee-wee. And I think it's really interesting to talk about Paul Reubens' relationship to Pee-wee-Herman, bringing it back to you know, Buffy the Vampire Slayer in terms of mental health. This movie deals so largely with legacy and, you know, whether or not you're going to embrace that legacy or not. And it's such a struggle for the, you know, the Donald Sutherland character
Well,
who
I've heard of some actors that are in those roles like that
sure.
that almost resent them because that's who they become known as. And then you have other actors like him that just kind of like, you know what? I'm going to make the best of it. And he continued to go on with it. It almost became who he was, even though he did these other roles.
Yeah. George Reeves is a great example of that, where he was the original Superman. And he would do the appearances and would like, you know, drink on the job. And like, you know, Hollywoodland's a great independent film that they did years ago, that I feel like really explores like the mental health journey of becoming like that character and that being that typecast, and like no one sees you as George Reeves, this person, the actor with feelings and emotions, but now you're Superman, this icon.
Well,
And
that was also that wasn't based on George Rizzo. That was based on I can't remember the actor's name, but the original Superman from like the 50s or 60s.
that's the guy's name. It's George Reeves. There's
Who am
George
I
Reeves and
thinking
then
of?
there's Christopher Reeves.
I was thinking Christopher Reeves. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
I'll shut up.
No relation, ironically. Um,
Okay, I'm a
but
dumbass.
no, you're fine. That's one of the things that, like, you know, coming back to the subject of legacy, it's one of the things that I love so much about the character journey of Buffy in this movie is she really kind of didn't want anything to do with this you know, this legacy of becoming a Slayer until like, you know, she did. And like just kind of getting to see her journey from like this is who you're supposed to be. I just thought that was such a fascinating thing to like watch, and like how successful like she ends up being by film's climax with her and Lorthor, or whatever the guy's name is.
You have the hardest time with names.
Lorthos. That's his name. Lorthos. Lothos. That's his name. There's no R there. Lothos.
Yeah, something like that. Luther, Lotho, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was as much as everybody else did a good job in the movie. Everybody remembers Reuben, Paul-Reubens.
I think it's really hard not to like walk away from this movie and you know like
It's it's
this
one of the
movie.
movies when you remember him, it's one of the ones you remember outside. It's one of the first most people remember outside of Pee-wee.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. And that's because of, he has but maybe like 8 minutes, maybe 12 at most here. Like it's not a whole lot of screen time, but he makes it count.
Because he seems like he's in it a lot more.
It no,
It's not
like
much.
it's not very much. Like the movie, the majority of the movie you are spending is with Buffy, it's with Merrick, it's with Pike, it's with Benny, it's with a lot of like the characters that we meet at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, okay. I thought he was
Like,
in it more than that. It's
uh,
amazing that he did that much of a job that you remember him being in it more than he really is.
yeah, I don't know, but like, I can't give you an exact number, but, um, you know, yeah, I'll just say that I think that, Paul Rubens does an exceptional job here.
Yeah.
It's one of his best roles without question.
Yeah. At least one of his most memorable. If
Do
nothing
you,
else, it's one of his most memorable.
do you have a favorite Paul Rubens performance?
Probably this one.
That's fair. This one's a really great one to pick. I said mine in the beginning, but I will re-emphasize that I really love him as I'm actually gonna pull up the name real quick so I can give the character credit, but I really loved him in Blow. I thought that him and Johnny Depp had tremendous chemistry.
I never
Uh
saw Blow. So
Blow is one of the Derek for reals is his name, and he is so charismatic and like punning in this movie, but he's so electric. Like Blow, I think is one of the most underappreciated Johnny Depp movies and biopics in terms of the 21st century. It is an incredible movie.
which one was Blow? I know he did a couple drug movies.
So Blow is the one with Blow is the story of George Chung, I think is how you say his name. But he basically established the cocaine market here in the United States in the 1970s.
Okay.
So
Because
this
I think
movie,
didn't
go
Johnny
ahead.
Depp do another one that was about the guy that created like LSD or something like
Fear and Loathing is I think is the one you're thinking about.
that? Okay.
Um, but yeah, this one it's Johnny Depp, Penelope Cruz, Paul Rubens, Ray Liotta, Ethan Suplee, Cliff Curtis. I mean, like, you know, this 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 cast in and of itself is also equally as good. Bobcat, uh,
Goldthwait.
Gothar, Gothwaite is in this movie as well. Um,
Goldthwait. Yeah.
Goldthwait,
Yeah.
you should check out this movie.
Bobcat Goldthwait is awesome. If you get a chance to see him live doing stand up, he's fantastic live. We saw him during our honeymoon. We went to a club and saw him.
Nice,
And I
nice.
think it was the same week we saw John Caparulo, who's like one of my favorite comedians. He's pretty funny.
Nice.
But yeah, little sidetrack,
Oh, you're fine.
detour.
I mean, we've had a lot of detours in this episode, so it's fine. Uh, you know, I think at the end of the day, like this is probably one of the. I feel like I don't get affected by celebrity deaths most often, but this one really made me sad because, like, again, this is a piece of my childhood, like, gone.
The only one that ever really got me was when Dimebag was killed.
Mm. Rip, rest in peace, my
Yeah,
friend.
that's the only celebrity
So,
death that like really bothered me was his. And that's because of how much I was into music, well, heavy metal specifically, and could tell you guitar players from listening to the sound of a guitar. I can tell you who it was at one point. And Dimebag was one of those guys that kind of got me into playing guitar at one point. So when he was killed, and the way it happened was just like, you don't hear of that happening.
Yeah.
It was a failure of security. So,
Yeah.
but anyways.
Yeah, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Yeah, I mean, I there's this movie. One of the things that like I was like trying to like think about talk about like we've talked about legacy and like how the mental health of weight of that. There's not a whole lot of like deep depth in this movie. It's
No,
pretty
there's
much
not.
like if you took like Clueless and like added in like a vampire killing element, it would be like that, and just set it in neon and with
Yeah.
cheerleaders. So
Yeah. And I was like, there isn't much depth to Clueless either. But it's
and I mean,
fun. It's another one that's just a stupid movie that's fun.
but I think like hosting a podcast like this, one of the things that like when we did a couple of weeks ago when we did the bad movie showdown, one of the things that like I walked away with that episode is a great episode. It was a lot of fun to make. Please go listen to it. But
And
I
all
was like,
three
man,
movies were great and
yeah, I was
horrible.
like, I walked away and I was like, I feel like we need more episodes that are like that, where where we're not necessarily diving in on deep thematics of mental health, but like we have like stupid passes. So like picking like one movie a month that is like just relaxation for our own mental health. And I felt like for as deep as we got on Frankenhooker, I thought Frankenhooker was one for July, but this one was like I was like, all right, this can be the one for August. It's fine.
And we've already discussed a possibility for next month. So
Yeah. So all right. Well, I think that's gonna do it for us on this episode of Abyss Gazing. Rest in peace to the late great Paul Reubens. But where can people find you online, my friend?
I'm actually painting again. Junk's getting ready to start showing up online. I had to work out the cobweb, so to speak, before I really painted anything to post.
Great movie.
But what?
Cobweb.
Oh, I haven't seen it. We're going to see Talk to Me this weekend. So, but anyways, yeah. Yeah, Titanium Juggernaut Painting on Instagram.
You guys can follow me. I am over on I'm really active on Letterboxd. You guys can at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can
Yeah,
follow us Abyss Gaming wherever you guys get your podcast from. Just hit the subscribe button. And you guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Patreon, YouTube, and wherever you guys get your podcast from. So until next time, remember the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes into you.